humanity's reputation in the galaxy didn't appear overnight. It was carved into the collective memory of countless civilizations that once dismissed humans as another short-lived, high-strung mammal species stumbling into space. The early years were full of mistakes, losses, and humbling encounters with civilizations far older and more experienced. But every empire that underestimated humans learned the same lesson: humans adapt faster than anyone else. What should have taken centuries, they achieved in decades. What was impossible for other species, they eventually treated as an engineering challenge waiting to be solved. At first, the galaxy laughed at humanity's chaotic brand of ambition. Then they witnessed what that ambition became when focused. Humans built engines that bent gravitational boundaries, terraformed dead worlds because they refused to accept lifelessness, and colonized harsh systems simply to prove they could. In every crisis, they pushed past their own limits. In every defeat, they returned stronger. A pattern emerged, one that unnerved even the most established powers. When humanity lost something, they didn't retreat. They rebuilt, recalibrated, and came back with solutions no sane species would attempt. It wasn't aggression that made humanity formidable. It was the refusal to accept a closed door. They had a talent for turning desperation into innovation. When a hostile empire tried starving Earth by collapsing wormhole trade routes, humans re-engineered the broken gates in months, using technology other species considered too unstable to touch. When a parasitic swarm overran a frontier colony, humans didn't quarantine the region like others would have. They engineered targeted microbial counter-life that eradicated the swarm and made the colony habitable again. By the time the wider galaxy understood what humanity was becoming, it was too late to dismiss them. They were the species that built allies instead of subjects, negotiated instead of conquered, but defended what they loved with a ferocity that bordered on myth. Among alien archives, one phrase became common: if humans arrive, choose cooperation. If you threaten them, choose a grave. It wasn't meant as an insult. It was survival advice. Historians across multiple worlds documented a shift in the galactic balance. Humanity no longer stood at the edges of great powers, they were one. Their territories spread not through conquest but through relentless exploration. Their fleets became synonymous with disaster response as often as warfare. Yet beneath all their diplomacy, everyone sensed the quiet truth: humanity was prepared for anything. They had seen too much, survived too much, and advanced too quickly for any rival to feel entirely at ease. Then came the whisper. One species had challenged them openly. Not an insurgent group, not a rogue fleet, not a border skirmish. A civilization. Ancient, secretive, and confident enough to strike at humanity directly. At first the reports seemed unbelievable. Entire listening posts dropped out of contact. Automated mining platforms went silent. Patrol ships dispatched to investigate never reported back. What little evidence remained suggested surgical precision, like something was removing traces of human presence system by system. For the first time in centuries, human leadership received intelligence that did more than concern them: it demanded total mobilization. No one knew the attackers' motives or their origins. Their technology didn't match any known empire, old or new. Their tactics were neither territorial nor diplomatic. It was as if they had marked humanity specifically, targeting them with an intention that felt cold, deliberate, and absolute. Across the galaxy, alien governments watched in uneasy silence. Some feared that this new threat would finally do what none of them could: stop humanity's rise. Others quietly hoped humanity would prevail, because if they fell, no one else stood a chance. Rumors spread in hushed tones. Old rival empires suspended conflicts just to observe what might unfold. They all recognized the significance of a single fact: someone had challenged the most relentless species known. And then the mystery deepened. After the first wave of strikes, nothing more was heard of this species. Not a signal, not a ship, not a trace. The attackers had vanished as abruptly as they appeared. No empire claimed responsibility. No clues revealed their identity. Humanity was left with silence, loss, and an unanswered question that would soon shape the fate of the galaxy. Who had dared to strike them, and why had they disappeared without a single fragment left behind? If you want, I can start section 2, 1,000 words, next. The first solid evidence of the attackers emerged on the edge of the Perseid expansion, where a long-range survey vessel intercepted a drifting human transport. The ship looked intact from a distance, but its interior was stripped of life. Not destroyed, removed. Every organic trace, from passengers to microbes, had been extracted with a precision that defied any known technology. There were no burn marks, no hull breaches, no signs of conflict. It was as if the ship had been dissolved from the inside out, leaving only an empty steel carcass behind. Humanity analyzed the vessel for weeks before accepting a single unsettling conclusion: the attackers were not using mechanical weapons. They were using biological mechanisms far beyond the sophistication of any known bioengineered species. This realization led researchers to a classification that spread quickly through military channels: the Eridani phage. The name came from the region where secondary evidence was discovered: nutrient-depleted planetary crusts showing patterns identical to cellular necrosis. Entire worlds had been drained like infected tissue. The phage were not a species in the conventional sense. They were an engineered collective organism designed to operate with the coordination of a hive mind and the efficiency of predatory microbes. Their bodies were not uniform. Each encountered form adapted within hours, altering structure and function in response to the environment. They did not communicate through radio or light. Their network relied on quantum-linked biological nodes that bypassed conventional interference. Attempts to decode these signals resulted only in corrupted data and degraded equipment, as if the transmission carried structural noise capable of physically damaging receivers. Human biologists recognized the danger instantly. This was an adversary capable of penetrating sealed habitats, overriding synthetic immune systems, and altering biomass at the molecular level. Even worse, every phage organism operated as an extension of the collective intelligence. Killing one did nothing. The hive adapted. The strategy evolved. As humanity learned more about them, it became clear that this entity was not simply targeting human infrastructure. It was consuming anything that represented a self-sustaining biosphere. But humanity was the only species that fought back hard enough to attract focused retaliation. The first recorded engagement against the phage confirmed their threat. A human scout flotilla encountered an anomalous structure orbiting a barren world. An organic lattice stretched across the remains of a mining installation. When the ships approached, the lattice unfolded into a swarm that enveloped the flotilla. The crews fought with plasma, particle beams, and kinetic rounds, but none of it slowed the attack. The phage didn't break formation under fire. They simply compensated for losses by redirecting mass and reorganizing their shapes mid-assault. Only 2 ships escaped, and their crew returned with severe biological contamination that required total incineration of the vessels. Across the galaxy, intercepted transmissions showed alien governments quietly distancing themselves from the conflict. No one offered aid. No one pretended neutrality. They preferred to observe from afar, believing humanity's downfall was imminent. The logic was simple: if the phage could dismantle human defenses so easily, standing against them was not just dangerous, it was suicidal. Human leadership, however, refused to accept the defeatist view spreading across the stars. They pulled records from ancient archives, searching for any historical trace of similar organisms. A few obscure references hinted that the phage were not newly emerged. They were an engineered weapon used by a vanished civilization during a war so ancient its participants were dust. If that civilization fell despite having built the phage, the implications were grim. This enemy was not merely predatory. It was designed to neutralize advanced societies entirely. Humanity's scientists agreed on one point: conventional warfare was hopeless. The phage adapted too fast, spread too easily, and struck with absolute efficiency. If left unchecked, they would not stop at human colonies. They would continue until every living ecosystem was consumed, leaving only sterile rock behind. More disturbing were the final recordings captured from the outer colonies before they fell silent. In the audio streams, faint and distorted, were rhythmic pulses resembling a coordinated biological chant, something between communication and a hunting call. Researchers suspected it was the phage broadcasting their collective focus onto humanity specifically. Targets chosen, pattern locked, prey designated. For humanity, the message was unmistakable. A species engineered for extinction campaigns had taken aim at them, and unless something unprecedented was done, the phage would sweep across human space with unstoppable precision. The galaxy braced for humanity's collapse. Humanity braced for war. Humanity's military analysts quickly realized that destroying individual phage organisms was meaningless. The collective mind restructured itself after every encounter, compensating for losses faster than human fleets could respond. What humanity needed was not a weapon to kill the phage bodies. It needed a way to disrupt the intelligence that bound them. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected place: deep space physicists studying gravitational resonance patterns around collapsed stars. They discovered that the phage's quantum-linked network behaved like a biological circuit spread over astronomical distances. The system was delicate, despite its complexity. A directed wave of gravitic distortion, precisely tuned, could disrupt the signal long enough to fracture the hive's unified awareness. The theory was dangerous. Generating a galaxy-scale gravitic pulse required constructing a massive resonator around a star on the verge of collapse. The structure would need to use the star's implosion as a power source, synchronizing a controlled gravitational cascade without triggering a chain reaction. Most species dismissed such projects as suicidal, but humanity had a long history of attempting risky solutions when no safe alternative existed. The proposal moved instantly to the top of all strategic discussions. If the phage's mind could be separated, even briefly, the collective would lose coordination. Their adaptations would become unsynchronized, their formations chaotic. That moment of disorganization would be humanity's only chance to strike. Engineers, physicists, and biotechnologists converged on the chosen star system. They didn't debate the odds. They simply began. The resonance structure required materials that could survive gravitational gradients that shredded conventional alloys. Humanity harvested exotic matter from rogue black hole accretion clouds, redirected comet cores to serve as cooling anchors, and repurposed dark energy containment fields from unfinished research stations. Every colony contributed something: data, materials, or personnel, turning the project into a species-wide effort. During construction, the phage advanced deeper into human territory. Their attacks grew more coordinated, as if aware that humanity was preparing something monumental. Colonies near the front lines held for as long as possible before evacuation, leaving behind automated mines and traps that barely slowed the phage's advance. Yet for every lost world, humanity gained time to finish the resonator before the phage reached the core systems. Every sacrifice was calculated. Every retreat was part of a larger timetable. Meanwhile, human scientists worked obsessively to refine the pulse's waveform. The phage network structure shifted frequently, forcing constant recalibration. Quantum simulations predicted thousands of possible resonance responses, many catastrophic. A misalignment of even a fraction could collapse the star prematurely, obliterating the surrounding system. Still, the work continued. Humanity had no margin for error, and no backup plan. At the same time, strategists developed a synchronized attack pattern to exploit the disruption they hoped to create. The moment the hive mind fractured, human fleets across hundreds of systems would initiate simultaneous strikes, cutting off escape paths, overrunning isolated clusters, and incinerating every disconnected phage fragment before the collective could reorganize. The plan required unified timing across light years, precise to microseconds. Humanity built a communication network dedicated solely to the operation, using entangled pair arrays hidden in deep space to coordinate the eventual counterstrike. As the resonator neared completion, morale across human space transformed. The fear that had accompanied the phage's early attacks was replaced by unwavering determination. Colonists volunteered for high-risk roles. Scientists refused rest. Fleet officers trained relentlessly for an engagement that would give them only a small window to eliminate the most lethal enemy humanity had ever faced. Their resolve hardened into something more than strategy. It became identity. They were no longer defending territory. They were preventing extinction. When the final calibrations were tested, humanity realized the scale of what they had built. The resonator wasn't just a weapon, it was the most ambitious engineering feat ever attempted. If successful, it would strike across cosmic distances, reaching into every corner where the phage operated. The galaxy's oldest empires observed from a distance, stunned that humanity dared attempt something so reckless. None of them would have risked it. None of them believed it would work. But humanity did not measure risk the way others did. They measured necessity. They understood that survival required choosing the path no one else would walk. The resonator represented everything the species had become: fearless, inventive, and unwilling to surrender existence to an enemy engineered for annihilation. With the structure ready and the phage closing in, humanity prepared for the decisive moment. The pulse would either fracture the phage's mind or tear the star apart and destroy the entire sector. There would be no second attempt. Humanity accepted that cost without hesitation. They had built the impossible. Now they would use it. When the resonator activated, the pulse did not erupt in brilliance or sound. It unfolded as a silent gravitational tremor that rippled through subspace like a shifting tide. Instruments across human space detected the distortions simultaneously. The fabric of the galaxy flexed, and every phage organism reacted at once. Their synchronized patterns faltered. Their movements desynchronized. Their quantum-linked nodes flickered as the unified intelligence that directed them began to fracture under the resonance impact. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the disruption deepened, splitting the phage's consciousness into millions of isolated fragments. The collective mind, once seamless, collapsed into chaotic clusters with no ability to coordinate or relay adaptive strategies. It was the opening humanity had gambled everything on. Human fleets were already positioned across every threatened system, armed with weapons calibrated specifically for phaged biomass. When the hive linkage broke, the attack orders transmitted instantly. Ships accelerated into action without hesitation. They didn't need deliberation. They followed an operation refined endlessly for this singular moment. Human warships surged through disrupted phage formations, targeting the network nodes that once relayed the hive's awareness. Without centralized guidance, the phage formations failed to counter. Organisms that once shifted shape with perfect efficiency now reacted with disjointed, inefficient motions, unable to anticipate human tactics or support one another. On the ground, human strike teams moved through phage-infested environments with a precision born of desperation and preparation. Specialized incendiaries, adaptive nanoblades, and sterilization drones carved through biological structures that once behaved like a unified organism. Now they pulsed erratically, unable to identify threats properly. Every cluster destroyed further disrupted any lingering network threads. Entire phage hives collapsed into inert masses as the distributed consciousness eroded beyond recovery. In space, the battles escalated into a coordinated sweep. Human dreadnoughts deployed gravitic shear cannons built specifically to sever the biochemical conduits that once protected phage cores. Frigates executed hit-and-vanish maneuvers, striking weakened clusters with surgical accuracy. Carriers launched waves of autonomous drones programmed to identify the last remnants of synchronized behavior and eliminate them before the hive could rebuild any portion of its intelligence. The phage were not simply losing, they were unraveling. The galaxy watched with disbelief. Species that once assumed humanity would fall now witnessed the opposite, a methodical eradication conducted across hundreds of systems in perfect synchrony. It wasn't brute force. It wasn't overwhelming firepower. It was the culmination of humanity's defining trait, an unshakable refusal to surrender, paired with a willingness to construct a weapon that no sane civilization would attempt. As the hours passed, the phage's attempts to reorganize grew weaker. Their adaptive patterns lost coherence. Their once flawless biological machinery malfunctioned, misassembled structures, or collapsed into sludge as the central intelligence failed to provide corrective oversight. Human scientists monitored the disintegration closely. The hive mind wasn't merely damaged, it was dissolving permanently. The resonance pulse had disrupted the foundational architecture holding the network together. Without that structure, the phage were nothing more than autonomous biological fragments, with no long-term stability. Human fleets pressed harder, eliminating every remaining cluster with relentless efficiency. They did not allow recovery, negotiation, or escape. The phage had targeted humanity with total annihilation. Humanity responded with equal finality. Their counterstrike wasn't fueled by revenge. It was survival, delivered with unmistakable clarity. As the last operational phage nodes collapsed, the galaxy-wide sweep reached its final stage. Human vessels executed sterilization passes over former phage strongholds, ensuring no dormant nodes remained. Orbiting structures were vaporized. Infested planets were purged with carefully controlled atmospheric burns. Any remaining biological residue was neutralized by engineered microbial agents designed to disassemble phage tissue at the molecular level. The cleanup took days, but the outcome was never in doubt. The phage were finished. Then, as quickly as the war had erupted, it ended. The phage did not retreat. They did not negotiate. They simply ceased to exist. Their extinction was total: no survivors, no hidden colonies, no residual hive. The collective mind that once spanned stars vanished into absolute silence, leaving behind only sterile ruins where thriving ecosystems once had been consumed. Humanity had not merely defended itself. It had ended one of the most advanced and lethal species the galaxy had ever encountered. And in doing so, it demonstrated something the galaxy had long suspected but never fully understood. Humanity's capacity to endure was matched only by its capacity to eliminate threats that demanded their extinction. The war had proven a final truth: if humanity was pushed to its limits, the result was not collapse, but the erasure of whatever dared to force their hand. Long after the last phage cluster disintegrated, the galaxy remained unnervingly quiet. The usual hum of political maneuvering, trade disputes, and border tensions faded into the background as every civilization tried to comprehend what humanity had done. The phage weren't defeated in battle, they were erased. A species engineered for extinction campaigns had itself been extinguished, not by an older empire or a technologically superior civilization, but by a species that had once been considered dangerously reckless and naively ambitious. In the aftermath, humanity did not celebrate. There were no declarations of triumph or monuments built to commemorate victory. The mood across human space was somber, almost reflective. Billions had died during the phage incursions, and entire sectors bore the scars of the conflict. The cost was heavy, and everyone understood that what happened was not a conquest but a necessity. Humanity had faced a force designed to consume civilizations without mercy. Leaving even a fragment alive would risk the return of an enemy incapable of coexistence. Teams of human researchers spread across former phage territories to confirm the permanence of the eradication. They examined decayed biostructures, inert nodules, and corrupted remnants of the hive's distributed neural systems. Every test yielded the same result: irreversible collapse. Without their quantum-linked mind, the phage had no ability to regenerate, evolve, or reconstitute themselves. They weren't dormant, they were gone. The galaxy realized humanity had executed an extinction event with precision bordering on surgical. Diplomats from dozens of species requested private meetings with human leadership. None approached with arrogance. Their messages were cautious, respectful, and tinged with fear. They sought assurance that humanity did not intend to repeat such decisive action against anyone else. Humanity responded with clarity: the phage were a biological apocalypse, not a rival power. Their extinction was not a template, it was an exception forced by circumstance. Human policy remained unchanged: cooperation when possible, resistance only when survival demanded it. Yet, even with these reassurances, something fundamental had shifted. Alien cultures rewrote strategic doctrines to account for humanity's capabilities. Historical timetables were revised to include the phage erasure as a new galactic turning point. Military academies across multiple civilizations used the event as a case study in unconventional warfare, highlighting humanity's approach to impossible problems, identified the core weakness, commit fully, and refused to accept any outcome short of survival. Human philosophers began debating the ethical weight of what had occurred. Was it right to erase a species, even one that posed an existential threat? Could a hive organism designed for consumption be considered capable of coexistence? The questions had no easy answers. Some believed humanity acted with unavoidable responsibility. Others argued the decision would shape humanity's identity for generations. But despite differing perspectives, one consensus formed: if faced with the same threat again, humanity would make the same choice. Existence could not be negotiated. Across human space, efforts shifted from warfare to restoration. Colonies lost to phage sterilization were reseeded with carefully curated ecosystems. Terraforming teams worked to rehabilitate scarred planets. Entire fleets were reassigned to reconstruction rather than combat patrols. The resonator itself was dismantled, its components repurposed so no civilization could attempt to misuse its power. The project had served its purpose, and humanity understood the danger of leaving such a weapon intact. As decades passed, the memory of the phage endured. Not as a story of conquest, but as a reminder: survival sometimes demands actions no species wishes to take. The galaxy gradually returned to its familiar rhythms, yet an undercurrent remained, an unspoken acknowledgement of humanity's role as a stabilizing force. Species that once doubted humanity's maturity now sought their guidance. Others kept respectful distance, recognizing that the same ingenuity that defeated the phage could dismantle any threat that pushed humanity too far. In quiet archives, human historians recorded the conflict with meticulous care. They did not romanticize it. They documented the decisions, the sacrifices, and the moral weight carried by every commander, scientist, and civilian involved. One inscription became central to the record: "We do not seek annihilation, but we will not allow our story to end." Humanity had survived a species engineered to consume civilizations. In doing so, they demonstrated the truth feared and respected by the galaxy: if pressed to the edge, humanity would not break. They would ensure the galaxy never faced the phage again, even if it meant bearing the burden of an extinction no other species dared to confront. And in the silent region where the phage once thrived, there was nothing left but darkness, a permanent reminder of the day humanity refused to die.